Welcome back to the deep dive. I want to start today by, by asking you to visualize a specific scene. It's a scene we've all been kind of conditioned to imagine by, 20 years of spy thrillers and cyberpunk novels.
Okay, I'm ready. What are we looking at?
We are imagining state-sponsored cyber espionage, the heavy hitters, the groups that keep national security advisors awake at night. When you picture them working, what do you see?
I see the cliche, honestly. I see a dark room, usually blue-tinted lighting, banks of curved monitors, maybe a wall of green code cascading down like the Matrix.
Right, exactly.
I see zero-day exploits, those magical digital keys that cost maybe $3 million on the gray market. We tend to think of this world as ultra-high-tech, like it's magic.
Yeah, we expect Mission Impossible, laser grids, and hackers dangling from the ceiling. But the reality we are looking at today is very different. We are looking at a campaign that is less about million-dollar code and more like, imagine MacGyver trying to break into a bank vault with a roll of duct tape and a rusty crowbar.
And the terrifying part, he actually gets in.
He gets in. Today we are diving into a brand new campaign. It's called Operation Macromaze. This is fresh intelligence covering activity from late 2025 right through into January of this year, 2026. And the group behind it isn't some teenager in a basement. It's APT28.
Fancy bear.
Fancy bear, yeah.
For those who haven't been glued to the threat intelligence feeds for the last decade, we really need to pause on that name. APT28 is not a minor player. This is a Tier 1 threat actor.
Absolutely.
They have been widely identified by Western intelligence agencies. We're talking the CIA, MI6, the BND in Germany. They identify them as a unit of Russia's military intelligence agency, the GRU.
These are the guys linked to the DNC hacks back in 2016. They've targeted the German parliament. They attacked the World Anti-Doping Agency.
That's a fair summary, yeah. They are a sledgehammer in the cyber world. They have huge resources. They have sophisticated custom malware suites, things like X-Agent or X-Tunnel.
Right.
They have a history of brute forcing their way into high-profile targets using very expensive, very complex custom code. They are known for shock and awe tactics in the digital domain.
So you have a top-tier predator. You expect top-tier complexity. But what makes Operation Macromaze so fascinating, and frankly what makes it so unsettling, is that for this specific mission, they threw away the expensive toolkit.
They went analog. Well, digitally analog, I guess.
They used macros, they used batch files, they used public free webhooks. This is stuff that a first-year IT student learns in their first semester. It feels almost insulting to the defenders, doesn't it?
It really is a case study in minimalism.
Yeah.
They targeted specific entities across Western and Central Europe, defense contractors, government bodies, and they weaponized simplicity.
Yeah.
They took the tools that are already sitting on your computer, legitimate services, standard Windows functions, and they turned them against the user.
It's the digital equivalent of hiding in plain sight. If you walk into a secure building wearing a repairman's uniform and carrying a ladder, nobody stops you.
That is the perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And the mission of our deep dive today is to figure out how. How do you spy on a secure, hardened European target in 2026 using technology from essentially 2005?
Right.
It turns out you don't need a stealth bomber if you know how to pick the lock on the back door.
Careful design rather than brute force. I
Yeah.
really like that framing. So let's get into the mechanics. Our sources for this, including threat intelligence from LAB52 and S2 Grupo, outline the whole kill chain. And this story, like so many bad days in the office, begins with an email.
The eternal vector, spear phishing.
We spend billions on AI firewalls, on predictive threat hunting, and yet...
And yet the human brain is still the most vulnerable operating system.
Exactly.
If you can get one person to click one link, or in this case, open one attachment, you've bypassed the perimeter. The firewall doesn't matter anymore because the user invited the vampire inside.
So the target gets an email. It looks legitimate. It's urgent. Invoice overdue, project update, that sort of thing. Attached is a standard Microsoft Office document. Now, usually when we talk about infected documents, the narrative is pretty simple. You click it, the script runs, boom, you're owned.
Right, immediate execution. That's the classic model.
But Operation Macromaze did something different, something much more subtle right at the start. Before the malware even runs, something happens.
Yes, this is the beacon mechanism. And to understand why this is so clever, we have to get a little bit technical about what a Word document actually is.
I think most people think a Word doc is just, well, a digital piece of paper.
Sure, that's how it looks on the screen. But technically, a modern Office file, anything ending in .docs, is actually a package. It's a ZIP file in disguise.
A ZIP file?
Yeah. If you were to change the file extension from .docs to .zip and open it up, you'd see a bunch of folders inside.
Wait, really? It's just a folder of XML files.
That's it. It's a bundle of XML code that tells Word, hey, put this text here, make this bold, put an image over there. It's essentially a local website packaged into a single file.
Okay, so it's a set of instructions.
Precisely. Now, in Operation Macramaze, the attackers cracked open that ZIP package and manipulated the underlying XML code. They inserted a very specific standard command called include picture.
Include picture? It sounds innocent. It sounds like it just wants to show me a corporate logo or a chart.
That is exactly what it's designed to do.
Yeah.
It tells Microsoft Word, hey, when you open this document, go fetch an image so we can display it. Usually that image is just sitting inside the document folder. But this field, it pointed to a URL on the public internet.
A remote image.
A remote image hosted on Webhook.site.
We're going to talk a lot about webhooks later, but for now, that's just a web address. So let's say I'm the victim. I'm sitting at my desk in Berlin. I double-click the document. Word opens. What actually happens?
Your copy of Word parses that XML. It sees included picture. It dutifully thinks, oh, I need to go get this image to render the page correctly. So without asking you, and this is key, without asking for any permission, your computer sends a request out to that URL to grab the JPG.
Does the image actually load? Do I see anything weird on the screen?
You might see a tiny logo, or maybe just a 1x1 pixel dot that's totally invisible to the naked eye. The image itself is irrelevant. It's the request that matters.
The request is the trap.
Think about it. To get that image, your computer had to reach out to the attacker's server. In doing so, you just handed them your IP address. You gave them a timestamp.
Wow.
The headers in that HTTP request tell them what version of Office you're running, maybe even what operating system you have.
So before I have even enabled macros, before I've clicked enable content or ignored a yellow security warning, I have already doxed myself to the attackers.
You've rung the doorbell. And for a group like APT28, this is crucial reconnaissance.
Why is that so important, though? Why not just infect me immediately with the macro? Why add this extra step?
Because sophisticated defenders use sandboxes.
Right, sandboxes. Explain how those work in this context.
If you work at a major defense contractor, your email scanner doesn't just look at the file name. It takes the attachment and opens it in a safe, isolated virtual machine first to see if it explodes.
Ah, so the scanner opens the document.
Scanner opens the document, the beacon pings the attacker. The attacker looks at the incoming IP address and sees, oh, this request is coming from an Amazon Web Services data center.
Huh.
Or a FireEye security scanner.
They know it's a bot.
Exactly. They know it's an automated analysis tool, so they don't send the payload, they stay quiet. But if they see an IP address coming from the German Ministry of Defense or a residential broadband provider in Brussels during working hours, they know they have a human.
That is diabolical. It's an "Are you real?" check.
It protects their operation. You don't burn your infrastructure on a robot. You wait to see the whites of their eyes.
So it's basically a tripwire. The document is the tripwire, and the webhook is the silent alarm bell in the attacker's headquarters.
Correct. And this happens entirely silently. The user just sees the document opening. Maybe they see a loading bar for a split second. But by then, the signal is sent. The attackers have verified the target is active.
Okay, so the pebble has hit the window. They know I'm home. I'm reading the document, totally unaware that I've just signaled my exact location. Now the real attack begins. And this is where we get into this concept of living off the land.
This is a phrase you'll hear constantly in modern cybersecurity. It sounds a bit rustic, doesn't it?
It sounds like a survivalist show, living off the land, like they're foraging for berries in the woods.
In a way, it is foraging. But instead of berries, they are foraging for administrative privileges. Look at it this way. If you break into a house and you carry a giant bag of burglary tools, crowbars, drills, explosives, and the police stop you, you're going to jail. It's obvious what you are.
Right, you look exactly like a criminal.
But if you break into the house empty-handed and you use the homeowner's own kitchen knife to pry open a drawer, if you use their own trash bags to steal the loot,
it's much harder to prove intent.
And much harder to spot on the security cameras. Living off the land in cyber terms means using the legitimate administrative tools that are already installed on Windows to commit the crime. You aren't downloading a giant file called virus.exe. You are using PowerShell. You are using CMD. You are using the exact same tools the IT guy uses to fix your computer.
So how did APT28 apply this philosophy in macromaze? Let's walk through the steps.
It's a chain reaction, a Rube Goldberg machine of standard Windows utilities.
Mm.
It all starts when you finally click Enable Content on that macro.
The big yellow bar at the top of Word. The one we are all heavily trained to ignore, but we click anyway because we really need to see the invoice.
The barrier of doom, yes. Once you click that, the macro executes a Visual Basic script, a VBS file.
PBS. That feels incredibly old.
It is ancient, it's been around since the late 90s, but it's still supported in Windows because countless businesses rely on it for legacy software. So the macro runs VDS, but the VBS doesn't do the damage itself, it just passes the baton. It launches a CMD file.
The command prompt. The little black box.
Exactly. Now we are 2 layers deep. The CMD file then runs a batch script.
We are literally going backwards in time here. Batch files. I remember writing batch files in DOS to launch video games.
Simplicity, remember. But here's why they do it. If a modern antivirus program sees a strange, heavily encrypted executable file running, it screams and blocks it. But if it sees a simple batch file running a command, well, system administrators write and run batch files every single day. They use them for login scripts, for mapping network drives, for automated backups.
It just looks like regular system maintenance.
It completely blends in with the background noise of the operating system. S2 Grupo, the analyst who broke this down, explicitly noted that the campaign relies on this basic tooling to evade detection. They are hiding in the sheer boredom of administrative tasks.
So the batch file is now running my machine. What is its first actual job?
Establishing persistence.
Which means the ability to survive a reboot.
Correct. Malware is totally useless if it disappears when you turn your computer off to go home for the night. They need to dig in like a tick. And to do this, they used scheduled tasks.
Again, a totally normal Windows feature. I use scheduled tasks to back up my hard drive every Friday.
And they use it to ensure their batch file runs every single time you log in. If an IT security guy looks at the list of scheduled tasks, unless he looks very closely at the command arguments, he just sees something labeled update check or system sync. He doesn't see Russian spy link.
It's almost frustratingly clever. They are using the operating system's own hospitality against it.
That is the core of living off the land. You don't bring weapons. You weaponize the environment.
So they've verified I'm real with the image beacon. They've established a persistent foothold using my own system tools. Now they need to actually spy. They need to communicate with the mothership. And this is where the campaign gets really creative with how it handles the web browser.
This was a fascinating area where the researchers at LAB52 actually saw the campaign evolving in real time. They watched the tactics shift from September 2025 into January 2026.
Oh, like A/B testing.
Exactly. They were adapting to what the defenders were catching. In the early days, back in late September, they used headless browsers.
Headless. It sounds gruesome.
It's a standard developer term. A browser usually has a head, which is the graphical interface, the buttons, the address bar, the window frame you actually see. A headless browser is just the processing engine. It loads the web page in the computer's memory, it processes the JavaScript, but it doesn't draw anything on the screen.
So it's completely invisible to the user.
Completely. Developers use it all the time to automate testing. If you want to know, does my website load fast? You run it headless 1,000 times. APT28 used it to quietly browse to their control servers and download commands without the user seeing a thing.
That sounds perfect for a spy. Why did they stop doing it?
Because it's a little too perfect. Normal business users don't generally run headless browsers. If you were an accountant at a defense firm, why is your computer suddenly spawning a headless instance of Microsoft Edge?
Oh, it's a behavioral anomaly. The endpoint security software flagged it.
Right, the security tools caught on. So in the later versions around January 2026, they switched to something arguably even more clever and honestly kind of hilarious. Off-screen execution.
Okay, you need to explain this one.
They launch a fully visible normal Microsoft Edge window. The head is back on. But the batch script includes spatial coordinates. It tells Windows to spawn that window at pixel coordinate -2000. -2000.
-2000.
Way off to the top left of your actual physical monitor. So the window is there, it is open, it is rendering a page, but it is floating out in a digital void where you can't physically see it.
That is delightfully low-tech. It's like hiding a spy under the bed instead of using an invisibility cloak.
And it works. To the operating system, it looks like a standard user-initiated browsing session. Oh, the user opened Edge. Totally normal. The fact that the user can't actually see the window isn't something the antivirus typically cares about.
But if it's a standard window, how does the malware control it? Usually, a human user clicks the buttons.
This is where the script uses an old Windows command called send keys.
Send keys.
It simulates keystrokes. It essentially ghosts them in. The script sends signals that look exactly like physical keyboard presses to that hidden window. Tab, tab, enter, Control-C, Control-V.
So they're basically puppeteering a ghost browser off the side of my screen.
And because the input looks exactly like hardware keyboard presses, it bypasses security measures that block automated scripts. Many security tools operate on the logic that if a human is physically typing, it's probably fine.
They are faking the humanity.
You got it. It's mimicry.
Yeah.
They mimic the system administrator with the batch files, and they mimic the everyday user with send keys.
But wait, there was another detail about the browser behavior that I found, frankly, kind of rude. The aggressive cleanup.
Yes, malware can be quite antisocial sometimes. In the second variant of the batch script, they included a command that aggressively terminates all other Edge browser processes.
So if I'm sitting there at my desk listening to a podcast on YouTube or checking my webmail in Edge and the scheduled malware runs,
Poof, your browser just instantly closes.
that seems incredibly risky. If my browser suddenly crashes for no reason, I'm going to be suspicious. I might even call the IT help desk.
It is very high risk. But for APT28, the priority here was clearly establishing a controlled environment. They needed to be 100% sure that when their hidden window opened and started receiving simulated keystrokes, it was the only browser window running. They didn't want those keystrokes accidentally going into your email draft. They traded stealth for absolute reliability.
It's a brute force move inside an otherwise stealthy campaign. They're saying, I don't care if you notice the crash as long as I get the data out in the next 30 seconds.
And getting the data out, the exfiltration part, that is the real crown jewel of this operation. That is where Operation Macromaze earns its name.
This brings us back to that word from the beginning of our deep dive, webhook. We touched on it briefly with the image beacon, but it plays a much, much bigger role here.
It does, and we really need to explain this clearly for everyone. Webhook.site is not a hacker tool. It is a legitimate, beloved tool for software developers all over the world.
What is it normally used for in a legitimate context?
Think of a webhook as a digital notification system between apps. Let's say you run an e-commerce store. When a customer buys a t-shirt, your store software needs to tell your separate shipping software to print a label. It does that via a webhook. It sends a structured packet of data to a specific URL.
Okay, follow that. And webhook.site lets developers test those connections?
Exactly. If I'm building that t-shirt store, I need to know if I'm sending the right customer data. So I go to webhook.site, it gives me a random temporary URL, and I configure my store to send the test data there. It shows up on a nice clean dashboard so I can debug it and make sure it works.
So it's basically a free, public, disposable mailbox for incoming data.
And APT28 looked at that and said, thank you very much. We'll take that for our espionage campaign.
They didn't even build their own servers.
No. And this is the genius of it. Usually, threat actors have to rent servers. They have to register domain names. They have to pay with laundered Bitcoin. All of that leaves a paper trail. It costs money. And once the defenders find the server IP address, they block it, and the hackers have to start all over again.
But here,
they just click a button to generate a unique URL on webhook.site. Take 2 seconds. It costs $0. If a defender blocks it, they just generate a new one instantly.
it's completely disposable espionage infrastructure.
It is. And it makes attribution, figuring out exactly who did it, much harder. Because the network traffic isn't going to a known Russian server farm in St. Petersburg. It's going to a legitimate service hosted on standard, trusted cloud infrastructure.
So explain the loop for me. The malware is on my machine. The browser is hidden off screen. How do they use the webhook in practice?
First, they use it for command and control, what we call C2. The malware checks a specific webhook URL to see if there are new instructions waiting. It asks, do you want me to download a new file? Do you want me to scan the network? Do you want me to just sleep for a week?
Okay, that makes sense.
But the really interesting part, and honestly, this is my favorite technical detail of this entire campaign, is how they get the stolen data out, the exfiltration.
Usually, hackers have to create complex, encrypted tunnels to sneak data out because network monitors are specifically looking for large files leaving the building.
Right. If I'm an IT admin and I see a 2 GB zip file heading to an unknown IP address in Eastern Europe, I'm blocking it immediately. That's Data Loss Prevention 101.
So how did APT28 get around that monitoring?
They use the form trick.
The form trick.
Remember that batch script we talked about earlier? Inside it, there's a block of code that dynamically generates a tiny temporary HTML file right there on your hard drive. It literally creates a web page on your computer.
A local web page.
A very simple one. It contains a standard HTML form, just like a Contact Us form or a typical login box you see on any website. The script takes the data it stole, maybe a list of your documents or your system passwords, and it secretly pastes it into the text fields of that local form.
Okay.
Then, using that hidden off-screen Edge browser, it submits the form.
Wait, so to the network security appliance monitoring the outbound traffic?
It looks exactly like you just filled out a web form. It looks like a standard HTTP POST request.
That is incredibly slick.
Would effectively mimic standard web traffic perfectly.
Yeah.
There's no suspicious file transfer protocol. There is no weird encrypted tunnel. Just a browser submitting a form to a website. It happens millions of times a day on any corporate network.
And where does that form send the stolen data?
To another webhook.site instance controlled by the attackers.
So on their end, somewhere in a GRU office, they are sitting at a webhook dashboard, and they just see form submissions popping up. First name, host, last name, speaker, password, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Exactly. And the source reports note a very critical point here. This method minimizes detectable artifacts on disk.
Because they aren't saving a massive file called stolensecrets.txt right on my desktop.
Right. The data is basically streamed out. It's captured in memory, put into the browser form, submitted, and then it's gone. The temporary HTML file is instantly deleted.
Right.
If a forensic analyst looks at the hard drive a week later, there's very little physical evidence to find.
It leaves no footprints, or at least very faint ones.
It leaves footprints in the network logs, sure, but they look like completely normal footprints. That's the core problem for defenders.
You know, when we started this discussion, you mentioned Operation Macramaze relies on simplicity. And hearing all this, batch files, web forms, webhooks, it does sound simple, but the way they strung it all together is, well, it's elegant.
That's the paradox of this whole campaign. The individual components are simple. The architecture is sophisticated. As the source material says, this campaign proves that simplicity can be powerful. The attacker uses basic tools, but arranges them with immense care to maximize stealth.
Let's talk about the broader implications of this. Why does this matter? Obviously, if you're a government target in Western or Central Europe, it matters a lot. But for the bigger picture of cybersecurity,
I think the biggest takeaway is the outsourcing of infrastructure. Historically, we defend networks by looking for known bad IP addresses. We maintain massive lists of malicious servers. But Webhook.site, that's a legitimate service. Thousands of your own developers might use it every day.
So you can't just block it at the firewall.
You could, but then you break the workflow for your own engineering teams. And even if you do take the hit and block it, the attackers can just seamlessly move to another free service. There are dozens of them. Request bin, paste bin, GitHub gists.
It turns the internet's own utility infrastructure against itself.
And let's look at the defensive challenges regarding the local tools. How do you block a batch file from running? System administrators use batch files every day to update software, manage user accounts, and trigger backups. If you block batch files, you literally break the computer.
So defenders are in a really tough spot here. They can't look for the tool itself. They have to look for the behavior.
Yes. They have to spot the anomaly in the sequence of events. They have to ask, why is a Microsoft Word macro spawning a command prompt? Why is Microsoft Edge running at coordinates -2000? Why is this specific computer sending form data to a developer testing site at 3 in the morning?
It requires a much more nuanced, context-aware approach to monitoring. It's not just red light, green light anymore.
It's pure behavioral analysis, and that is expensive to implement and incredibly difficult to tune correctly without generating 1,000 false alarms a day.
And we should reiterate the targeting here. This wasn't a spray and pray spam campaign trying to hit millions of grandmothers.
No. The strict targeting of specific entities in Western and Central Europe implies a direct geopolitical interest. This aligns perfectly with APT28's history and their mandate. They're looking for high-level intelligence. They want to know what governments, military contractors, and perhaps critical infrastructure providers are thinking, planning, and doing.
And with the timeline running from September 2025 to January 2026, this is happening right now. Or it was, until very recently when it was exposed.
It's a stark reminder that these advanced persistent threat groups are constantly active. They don't take holidays. And they are constantly evolving. The shift from headless browsers to the SendKeys method over just a few months shows that they are watching the defenders closely too. When we block one door, they find a window.
So let's recap this journey, because it's quite a ride and there are a lot of moving parts. I want to make sure I have the full picture clear for everyone listening.
Sure. Let's step through the attack chain one last time.
Step 1. The user gets a spear phishing email and double-clicks the attached Office document.
Step 2. The beacon triggers via the manipulated XML structure. A silent image request goes out to a webhook, verifying to the attackers, hey, we have a live human here and it's not a security sandbox.
Step 3. The user inevitably clicks Enable Content, launching the Russian doll of scripts. VB script hands off to CMD, which hands off to a batch file.
Step 4. The malware establishes persistence using scheduled tasks so it doesn't just disappear when the user reboots their machine.
Step 5. It opens Microsoft Edge. Initially, they tried headless mode, but later they switched to opening a real visible window and shoving it completely off screen to coordinate -2000, controlling it with simulated keystrokes.
And finally, step 6. It scrapes the sensitive data, pastes it into a custom, locally generated HTML form, and submits it to another webhook, looking exactly like totally normal internet traffic to any firewall observer.
It is elegant in a very dark, pragmatic way.
It really is. It's effective because it respects the rules of the operating system, rather than trying to break them with a sledgehammer. It uses the system's own logic to subvert it.
We try to end these deep dives with a core takeaway for you, the listener. For me, Operation Macramaze is a massive reality check. We spend so much time in this industry worrying about AI-driven cyber attacks or quantum computers breaking our encryption, but the biggest threats are often just clever, patient people using simple tools very creatively.
That's absolutely right. Security isn't just about blocking the advanced sci-fi stuff. It's about spotting the misuse of the ordinary. It's about realizing that a simple Contact Us form can be a devastating exfiltration tunnel if you aren't paying close attention to the context.
And here's a thought to leave you with. If state-sponsored spies, some of the absolute best and most well-funded hackers in the world, are choosing to use free public tools like webhooks and standard browser forms to steal national secrets, what does that say about our ability to distinguish between malicious and normal internet activity?
That is the uncomfortable question we all have to face. Are we reaching a point where legitimate, everyday web traffic is actually the best possible camouflage? If the bad guys look exactly like the good guys doing standard administrative work, how do we ever truly secure the network?
Something for you to mull over the next time you see a loading screen hesitate or catch a weird flicker on your monitor out of the corner of your eye. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.
Stay safe out there on the network.
Stay curious, stay safe, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.